Retro Static Radio brings you The Guiding Light, originally created by Irma Phillips. Oh, don't worry, Maria, I'll get it. Hello?
May I speak with Mrs. White, please?
And who may I say is calling?
Dr. Bowling.
Oh, how are you doing, Doctor? This is Ted White.
I'm very well, and you?
Never better. Meta?
Yes, dear?
The call is for you. It's Dr. Bowling.
Oh, thank you. Hello?
I'm sorry, Maida. I didn't think your husband had returned from his camping trip.
He and Chuckie got home late last night. I suppose I should have phoned you.
It's quite alright with me. I would have phoned earlier, but I was unable to get in touch with Dr. Hewitt.
Dr. Hewitt?
The child psychologist.
Oh, yes. I'd forgotten for the moment.
Do you think you'd be able to see him the first of next week?
Yes, anytime.
Well, suppose we say 11 o'clock at the hospital.
Okay. Should I bring Chuckie along?
No, I think the doctor would rather speak with you first.
Oh, all right.
Supposing you stop by my office.
All right, Ross, I will. Thanks.
Not at all. I'll see you then. Bye, Maida.
Goodbye, Ross.
This phone call from Dr. Bowling was most inopportune, wasn't it, Maida? You recognize that Ted is going to ask for an explanation. I wonder what it is you're going to tell him. The truth?
I think, Ted, that I'll get to bed.
It's a little early, don't you think, Maida?
I'm just a little tired.
What is it that Dr. Bowling wanted?
It really isn't important.
Phoning at this time of night? It's nearly 10 o'clock. He must have had a reason.
I think I told you once before that I'd rather not talk about Ross with you.
I have no intentions of discussing him with you, Maida. I merely asked a casual question. The fact you choose not to answer it is entirely up to you.
There's no secret about it. I haven't really been feeling quite up to par. I phoned the hospital earlier this afternoon wanting to make an appointment for a checkup.
Oh?
Dr. Bowling wasn't in, so I left a message for him to call.
And just what is it that seems to be wrong, my dear?
I don't know. I just haven't been feeling too well.
I'm sorry. I was thinking only at dinner time how well you looked.
Looks can be deceiving, Ted.
Of course, my dear. When is your appointment?
Monday.
I sincerely hope that the doctor doesn't find anything wrong. Perhaps you'll just need a nerve tonic.
Perhaps.
Perhaps you should go to bed, my dear. I'll be along shortly.
Good night, Ted.
Good night, dear.
Never been here before. It's so high. Too high. Chuckie, don't go near the edge. Chuckie, don't! Chuckie!
Maida! Maida, wake up! Wake up, my dear. There. It's okay.
The same dream. I can't stand it.
Good heavens.
Did I wake you?
I was just nodding off to sleep.
I'm sorry. It was so vivid, just like the last time.
Where are you going?
I'm going to see our child.
I was in his room only a half hour ago. He was perfectly all right.
That was a half hour ago.
You're not fully awake, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm fully awake. I am being stupid. Of course, Chuckie's all right.
Shall I turn off the light?
No, please don't. I won't disturb you, will I, if I read a bit?
No, of course not. If I'm to understand you correctly, you said something about the same dream?
Yes, in every detail.
What same dream?
I know this must sound very silly to you, but it even does to me, and yet it's the third time I've dreamt it.
Would you care to tell me about it?
I don't think you'd really understand.
What is there to understand about a dream, a nightmare?
If I hadn't dreamed it before, I wouldn't have been so upset.
That isn't unusual, you know. At the university, I had a recurring dream, a nightmare. On more than one occasion, even after I graduated, I had experienced the same dream. You see, I've never really liked mathematics. It was my weakest subject, and I had a great fear of the final exams. A fear I wouldn't pass. I used to awake in cold perspirations, thinking I had failed and hadn't graduated. There was always one problem I was just unable to work out in my dream, and because of that one problem, I failed in the course. I deduced later, after I had graduated, there hadn't been any concern about passing the course at all. However, every time I was up against something difficult to solve, the old dream, that nightmare, would come back. There was a simple explanation, you see. I finally concluded that any difficulty I could not solve took the form of mathematical problems that I couldn't work out. I'm sure there isn't one of us who doesn't experience that sort of thing. Every once in a while, anyways.
There was a very rational explanation for your fear. I'm not sure there is for mine. I can't explain it away, Ted. I thought when Chuckie and you were on your camping trip that I was very much concerned about Chuckie, that something was going to happen to him. But once you and he were home again, that would be the end of my nightmares. But tonight, I am truly frightened again.
And what was the nightmare? Tell me about it.
It's so far-fetched that I would rather not talk about it.
Don't you think it'd ease your mind if you did?
I don't think so. It isn't only the dream that frightens me. The feeling of apprehension that keeps hold of me after the dream is over.
That's because you permit yourself to dwell on it too much.
That could be.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes, of course.
When you see Dr. Bowling Monday for your checkup, suppose you discuss this dream with him.
Are you being sarcastic?
Of course not, dear. I'm only trying to help you.
I'm sorry. I think you can turn out the light now. I'll try to go to sleep.
Good night, my dear. But you can't sleep, can you, Meta? You wait, tense, apprehensive, until you hear the regular breathing of your husband, until you know he's asleep. Then you quietly leave your room and go to Chuckie's room and watch over a sleeping child whose life, for some reason, you dreamed had been snuffed out.
You're very punctual, Meta.
I don't like to keep Doctor waiting. Time is very important, I know.
Yes, it is. But before you meet Dr. Hewitt, I'd like to tell you a little bit about him.
All right.
He's a young man, as far as psychologists go. He's definitely not a psychiatrist. He's made a study of children, of child behavior. He's got 2 youngsters of his own, and I think he's one of the most competent men in the city. He's a very matter-of-fact person, Meta, and yet, he has great compassion and deep understanding. You can feel free to express your deepest concerns about Chuckie.
Ross, I don't know how to thank you. As always, whenever I've needed help, you've been more than a friend.
I think Dr. Hewitt is waiting for us.
You wouldn't admit it, Dr. Bowling, but as you walk with Meta down the corridor to meet Dr. Hewitt, you can't help having a feeling of protectiveness for this woman, who, for the first time, seems helpless. And you, Meta, you're hoping beyond hope that Dr. Hewitt will be able to help you, to guide you, to helping Chuckie. We'll learn more about this in a moment. It's a little-known fact that the reason daytime dramas are called soap operas are because of the early days of radio. They were sponsored and endorsed by soap and detergent companies. Who are we to break tradition? Today's episode of Retro Static Radio is sponsored by Wood Dragon's Garden. For organic, hyperallergenic, detergent-free, mostly vegan, and frankly just beautiful soaps, please follow the link in the description or go to wooddragonsgarden.com. These soaps come in the traditional square, or you can get them in some special shapes like dragon eggs and skulls. My personal favorite is the lavender bud scent. That's wooddragonsgarden.com with an S after dragon. They also have a Facebook page, so please check them out and get some of the best soap ever, bar none. How long have you known Dr. Bowling, Mrs. White?
I should say perhaps 4 years. Why do you ask?
No reason, really. He's a very fine man, what we call a doctor's doctor.
Tell me, Dr. Hewitt, did Ross, Dr. Bowling, go into any details as to my problem?
No, we didn't. Except to say that you felt that you had a problem with your youngster.
Well, then you haven't any idea of my boy's background?
Of his background, yes. I have a fairly clear idea of the many ramifications, shall I say, of the situation that exists prior to your marriage to Mr. White.
Well, you know then that, well, I wasn't married when I gave birth to Chuckie.
Yes, I know. Tell me this. Has your child asked any questions in regard to his foster parents?
Not for a very long time now, Doctor. I guess you can say I was frightened when the Brandons returned Chuckie to me. I didn't know if he would ever forget his foster parents, but he made a very fine adjustment. I must give my husband most of the credit for that adjustment.
Oh, in what way?
When Chuckie was only 3 years old, that was before Mr. White and I were married, he made it very clear to the boy that I was his mother, that Charlotte and Ray were friends of mine who'd taken care of him until I was able to.
Do you feel, in your mind, that Chuckie really accepted that explanation?
I think he did, but one can't be too sure.
Has he ever referred to the Brandons as his mother and father to you?
No.
Okay, has he seen them since he left their house?
Yes.
Recently?
Quite recently, although my husband has put his foot down on Chuckie ever seeing them again.
Yes. Yes, I think that's a wise decision. Well, for the time being, we'll accept the fact that Chuckie has made a complete adjustment emotionally, at least. Now then, Mrs. White, what troubles are you having currently with the boy?
I don't think I can call it trouble. It's rather difficult to put into words, to make anyone understand just how I feel, my fears.
Well, you might at least try.
I'd first have to explain my husband to you. He is, in his own way, deeply attached to Chuckie, but Dr. Hewitt, I'm going to be perfectly frank. I don't believe my husband and I would be married today if it wasn't for Chuckie.
I see.
Mr. White is I suppose you can say he's a perfectionist. He was born and reared in England. His own mother and father were divorced when he was very young. His father never remarried. Ted went away to school at an early age, as many British children do. Until very recently, he'd assumed his mother had rejected him, but he found out that she truly did love him, wanted him with her, but it was his father that kept him from seeing his mother.
That is interesting.
I'm only telling you this because I feel so much of what Ted is today is what happened in his youth. Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps he is how he is regardless.
He's an advertising executive, isn't he?
He deals mostly with talent. He's been exceptional at molding people, and I have the feeling that he's trying to put Chuckie into a mold that's foreign to the boy's makeup.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
My son is not a very affectionate child.
Well, many boys aren't demonstrative.
It isn't a matter of showing me affection. He doesn't have any affection to show. He doesn't seem to want any.
He must be a fairly independent young man.
I don't think he is. I think he's a very insecure child that's just a bundle of fears and conflicts. He wants so much to live up to what his father expects of him.
And what does his father expect of him?
The impossible.
What is the impossible, Mrs. White?
My husband wants to develop strength in Chuckie. He won't permit him to anything he deems a weakness. Dr. Hewitt, Chuckie's afraid of any physical hurdle, and yet Mr. White will expose him time and again to which the child fears most. Of course, I don't know what's going on in Chuckie's mind, but his father insists he take boxing lessons.
And the boy doesn't want to.
No, and he's afraid of the water.
Well, that's a surprisingly normal reaction, Mrs. White. But with good instruction, that can be overcome without force.
My husband is my son's instructor in everything.
Oh. You know, Mrs. White, there are some children who, within their own makeup, are not fitted for the usual physical activities of other boys. Their inclinations, their aptitudes, might run along different lines.
I think I've tried to explain that to my husband, but I haven't been able to do so successfully.
Well, to give only an offhand opinion, Mrs. White, I would be inclined to think there isn't a thing wrong with the boy. That the trouble lies with the parents, which is often the cause.
Dr. Hewitt, I know all I've told you sounds a bit unbelievable.
Oh no, not at all.
But I would like you to see Chuckie, so that you can form your own conclusions.
No, I'm not interested in seeing Chuckie at this moment. I would, however, be very interested in talking with your husband.
I don't think that would be possible.
And why not? Surely he must have some invested interest in the happiness of his son. What does he want to do? Unless, of course, he has an idea of creating a monstrous giant of this child, interested in only his physical achievements.
Well, that's something I can't answer.
Why don't you have your husband stop by the hospital? I'd be only too glad to talk with him. I'd like to hear his side of things.
You think I may be exaggerating?
Mrs. White, in my experience, I have found that mothers can sometimes be very protective when their sons are concerned. That's very natural, normal, mind you. I find many times when I talk to the father, I get an entirely different picture.
And in that case?
Oh, I'm more prone to consider both stories and try to find the middle point in which to work.
Is that all you can tell me at this time?
I'm afraid so, Mrs. White. It's most importantly I talk with your husband before I see your son.
Well, I can't promise you anything. Yet, I'll do my best that Mr. White makes an appointment to see you.
Would you like a cocktail before dinner, Meta?
I don't believe so.
I think it'd do you good.
I really don't think I'll have time for one. I'd like to supervise Chuckie's bath.
Oh, come now, my dear. Is it necessary to baby the youngster?
It isn't a matter of babying him. You know how youngsters are. If you don't want to watch them, a bath amounts to a lick and a promise.
So what of it? The important thing is, the more responsibility you give a child, the more self-reliant he becomes. Now then, you drink this cocktail I've prepared for you. Leave Chuckie to his own devices. Please, sit down and tell me what happened this morning. What did Dr. Bowling have to say? I hope he found you feeling not up to par, merely a matter of nerves.
Ted, I lied to you the other evening.
Lied? About what, Maida?
Ross's phone call.
Oh?
While you and Chuckie were away, I had a long talk with Dr. Bowling.
I see.
No, you don't. Because I haven't told you any of this yet. I didn't discuss with him anything pertaining to myself. I talked with him about Chuckie.
Chuckie? Why, the boy's in tip-top shape. He's never looked better.
I wasn't speaking of his physical well-being.
What then?
Ted, I know this isn't news to you. We've argued about it more than once.
I don't believe I quite follow you, Maida.
Surely you can't have forgotten so soon how I feel about your treatment of Chuckie, your disregard of his fears, his conflicts, your blindness that he's becoming different from other children.
He is different from other boys. He always has been.
No, that I can't and won't believe.
As you said a moment ago, we've gone over all of this. Not once, half a dozen times. At this point, the subject is quite boring. Chuckie is going to have to overcome certain weaknesses, and I am going to see that he does. However, I would be interested in what Dr. Bowling did have to say.
Ross suggested I talk to a child psychologist.
Good heavens, Meta! Surely you're not so stupid
Now,
as—
just a minute, Ted. When Ross phoned the other evening, he confirmed my appointment with Dr. Hewitt, a child psychologist. I kept that appointment this morning.
Oh, this is the last straw. I don't want to hear the result of your interview with what I believe is a parasite on the medical profession.
Well, you're going to hear it, Theodore White, and you're going to hear it now.
It would be obvious to anyone, and particularly to you, Meta, that Ted is far more than angry. Even you are aware that he's using every bit of self-control as he looks at you and sips his cocktail. But I think he also realizes that you're determined for him to hear you out. I'm completely fed up with your neurotic obsession. And to think, without even consulting me, you took the liberty of discussing a problem that does not even exist with an absolute stranger.
Mother, pardon me, please.
Of course, son. What is it you want?
I'm ready for my bath.
Your mother isn't going to be supervising your bathing tonight, Chuckie. She and I are quite convinced that you're able to take your own bath.
But I don't know how to get the water running.
Chuckie, I'll be there.
Maida. Chuckie, ask Maria if she'd be so kind as to draw the water for you.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to inspect you, young man, after you've bathed. Don't forget the ears, the neck, and the toes.
Yes, sir. Can I please play with my boat in the bath for a little?
Yes, of course, dear.
Playing with toys in the tub, son? That's for babies, not for a 6-year-old. By this time you should know that bathing is not playtime.
Yes, sir. Do you want me to come in the den when I'm finished?
Yes, son. Now run along now.
All right, Dad.
What's wrong with the boy having a boat in a tub of water? Ted, you carry things too far.
And you have already carried him too far, Maida. I'm not having my son be completely dependent on his mother, or anyone else, for that matter.
Ted, I want you to make an appointment for you to talk to Dr. Hewitt.
You cannot be serious.
I've never been more serious.
My dear wife, you have a well-mannered, well-tempered, well-adjusted son. He presents absolutely no problems to you or I. I see no reason to speak with a man who calls himself a psychologist.
You don't know Dr. Hewitt. You don't know his reputation or the work he's done. You have no reason to be prejudiced in which you know nothing. I found Dr. Hewitt to be very understanding.
Really?
He didn't give me any opinion on Chuckie.
That's unusual, isn't it? I always thought these men had all the answers at their fingertips.
Your sarcasm is being wasted on me, Ted. Whether you know it or not, Chuckie is not a happy child. Everything you've planned for him, and are planning for him, goes against that boy's nature.
That is your opinion. It does not have to be mine.
I took the liberty of explaining your background to Dr. Hewitt, and my own. I told him my opinion of Chuckie in relation to his current environment, which you have to concede is entirely dictated by you. However, Dr. Hewitt wasn't content with my opinion. He told me very frankly that I might, very well as a mother, be apt to exaggerate Chuckie's problem.
But Chuckie has no problem. I think if the truth were known, it's you who were the problem.
Possibly I might in some way be contributing to the situation, but there's also the possibility that you could be at fault.
I can't recognize that there's a problem with Chuckie. Therefore, I can't recognize that I'm at fault for something that doesn't exist.
Ted, I'm asking you to see Dr. Hewitt. You can at least talk with him, can't you?
To me, it'd be a waste of time.
Would it be a waste of time if, after he talked with you, he found, as you concluded, that I'm wrong and you're right, and I'm willing to take that chance? If I'm wrong, I want to know it. And if you're wrong, I want to know that too.
Maida, if I weren't so certain that you were making something out of nothing, I'd be only too glad to oblige. Even though I resent and object strenuously to what you've done.
It won't do any harm, will it?
But it's so stupid!
That's what you think now. Perhaps if you speak with Dr. Hewitt, you'll change your opinion.
Well, it might be interesting at that. I might be able to open his eyes to a few things in which he no doubt is totally unawares.
What do you mean?
I've never had an occasion to talk to a child psychologist. Perhaps it wouldn't be a bad idea, Meta. As you said, you could be wrong.
Then, may I make an appointment sometime this week?
Where is his office?
I didn't go to his office. He spends several days a week at the Selby Flats Hospital giving his services for free.
Well, I'd prefer to see him at his office. I'll make the appointment myself. How do you spell his name?
It's Dr. Robert Hewitt. Hewitt.
Daddy, Daddy, Daddy! Daddy! Dad!
Chuckie, something's happened. I knew it would. I knew it. I'm coming, Chuckie. I'm coming. I'm coming, Chuckie.
The turmoils of the White family are never ending. The turmoils of the White family are never ending. Yet, that is the end of today's episode. However, next week, Retrostatic Radio comes back with part 2 of The Guiding Light, The Child Psychologist. Retrostatic Radio is made possible from the generous donations of listeners like you, so please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com. If you'd like to make a one-time donation, including choosing a movie special, then please go to the Retrostatic Radio page on Ko-fi.com. And if you're a small business, podcast, or just otherwise want your brand on episodes of Retrostatic Radio, please email us at retrostaticradio@gmail.com to discuss our sponsorship opportunities. Sharing is caring, so please, if you enjoyed this or any other of our broadcasts, subscribe where possible, share wherever you can, and please follow our social media pages on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for the latest fun from our social media team, Megan, Dawn, the Squishy Fawn, and Priscilla the Yarn Dragon. This concludes our broadcast day. Good night, and God bless.